Story
It's
bites.
a Wednesday this week. Sorry, folks. There were some technical issues with Monday this week. It was just the Monday was leaking, so we're using Wednesday
Tell the truth,
instead.
Jimmy. Tell the truth, Jimmy. The weather was too good, and we were outside having beers.
I wish we were outside having beers, Gary. I was outside drinking tea, thinking I wish Gary was here with beers, but Gary doesn't come around no more. Not since the incident. Hi, everyone. How are we doing?
Anyway,
We're good.
so there's a lot to talk about this week. The Premier League is done. Everything is kind of sorted. Champions League, Europa League. It's just basically a Jimmy in case of who sits where. So it's all about the Europa League, the Championship, and I suppose Jimmy has data and numbers that we want to talk about.
Oh, yes. I have shiny new numbers on metrics that none of you have ever heard before because I have been playing with data, which is my favorite thing to play with until GTA 6 comes out. It's lovely and it's delicious, and there are some surprises, and it's about last week and the last 2 weeks because there's only a fortnight left. It's 37 and 38, and the game's all over.
Before you go fucking on anywhere, data's my most favorite thing to play with until GTA comes out. There's something bigger and more important going to be coming out well before that. So how dare
Another
you?
Game, John. A game being released and launched.
Please tell us more. I really need to get a t-shirt.
Do you know what? I'm going to get you one over the next
shirt.
2 weeks. Let me put that on the to-do list. We'll get that done. I also need a new one because I bleached mine. I'm an idiot. But
I'd like to move to a Statr tank top. It's warm, John. It's really warm.
Oh, baseball cap.
Merch. So we're talking merch. If anybody has
any suggestions on what merch to get, please put it in the comments.
Hit us with comments. What do you want? Do you want pens? Do you want hats? Do you want buttons? Do you want stickers? Nobody wants stickers unless they're pininis. But anyway, on with the roadshow. Our app will be ready for the new Premier League season, so keep an eye out on the site. We're currently going through some testing, some bits and bobs. So for the new Premier League season, next season, the season coming, when it's basically like Netflix, Arsenal, it's all about next season for us. Yes, and that's my one Arsenal reference for the day. Okay.
You're at one.
I'm done. Gary, Europa League final, talk to me. I know you have no skin in the game, so you can talk objectively.
Yes, I am actually really looking forward to this final because both clubs have so much riding on this. I'd argue that I would probably argue United have more riding on this than Spurs, but let's be honest, they both have a lot riding on this. There's a lot of money for Champions League qualification, and if you talk United, United's cost cutting and cost saving measures, etc., over the last 12 months or so, particularly since Jim Ratcliffe has come in, they need this money. And actually, just on a separate note, I'm not one to praise Amarin that much, but it actually it only came out this week that he's paying for all of his backroom staff to actually go to the final in Bilbao. Because
it's more than that. It's actually more than that.
Is it more than that?
It's more than that. So he's paying. So any of the staff who would have had tickets to the Europa League final, so they've essentially, Man United this year have said that they're not paying for the transport, travel, and tickets for basically the match day staff and stuff like that.
Anyone outside of the player squad, essentially, wasn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
But go on.
Well,
they're broke. I get it. They're broke.
Yeah, but anyway, Amarim is footing the bill himself.
That's a good dude right there. Yeah, that's a good dude right there.
It is. Credit where it's due. He's putting his hand in his pocket. He is paying for flights, accommodation, 2 match tickets for each of his backroom staff and beyond. But it's shitty from United. Each of the players are only getting 2 tickets to give to family members. Now, look, fine, they can afford it, but at the same time, it's just a break away from reality. Whatever about the players, you can put that aside. But for the backroom staff, who wouldn't be earning a fraction of what a player earns, that was a shitty move by United, but a classy move by Amarin. So, sorry, a little bit of a tangent there, but it should be called out.
I'm going to throw something at you, Gary. Again, totally uninterested in this game other than what it means for Brighton spots. But while United may have more skin in the game financially, I think Ange is probably a bigger risk than Ruben Amorim.
Ange is getting fired.
Ange needs this. Ange is getting fired if he doesn't win, or else he's becoming the second English manager in 3 years to win in Europe and immediately get fired, which would be an insane trend to see starting. English club.
English club. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. English club. My
No,
bad.
that's fair.
Moises certainly isn't English either. But I think there's
that's
probably
a fair
more skin on Ange there,
100%, Jimmy. I think that's a fair shout. I think it becomes harder to sack Ange if he achieves Champions League.
You can't. If
he wins hang on. You'd put nothing past Spurs and Daniel Levy.
Well, I mean, they did sack Jose the week before a final because
and how he handled the Pochettino situation and all that at the time. Like they were a club on the up. Let's not forget, like within the last 5 or 6 years, Spurs were in the Champions League final and narrowly lost. To be fair, in a very even
the worst Champions League finals I've ever seen. By the way.
It was a terrible Champions League final, but I was happy because Liverpool won it. But anyway,
and there's your Liverpool reference for the match.
That's your only Liverpool reference tonight. But Jimmy, you're 100% right. I don't think you can sack Ange when you've qualified for the Champions League. I think you've got to back, regardless of what's gone on in the league. We've spoken about it here. They have been decimated by injuries, particularly at the back. They have a good core squad there, particularly at the back, and they've got decent options up front. I think they just need to beef up a little bit in the middle. It'll be interesting to see what they do in the summer, particularly if they get Champions League qualification and they have the extra money to spend.
I think there's a few interesting factors in this one, right? For me, there's a few because Ange said at the start of the year and got laughed at, I win things in my second year. It's his second year. He's in a final. That's balls out. As you said, they've been decimated by injury. They play mental football. I remember watching Ange last season when they came in and they went down to 9 men and they played that high line against Chelsea. Normally teams, when they go a man down, they pack the box and go, nope, you shall not pass. And he went, no, our best way to beat you is to absolutely gun at you at 100 miles an hour and play on our halfway line. And we do not move from our halfway line, even if that ball goes over the top. I love his mental brand of football when he has his players.
Yeah. I think he'd be a loss to the Premier League if he does get sacked, to be honest with you. I think he's brilliant.
I think there's even an element of if Spurs can get a couple of midfielders and a Son replacement up in the top. Son's cooked for me. That's my hot take of the week. I think Son's done. He has not been the same player over the last 18 months. He looks tired. He looks like he's lost that yard of pace, and he's not put. Now the Harry Kane's not there. Him and Kane aren't doing that dovetailing, and
yet he's their highest scoring player year to date. The only one on 11 points plus per game.
I'd imagine, I would imagine.
And it's not a poor score. 11's a good score. 11 gets you onto the first page overall. I mean, he's there and he's always there, but it's obviously in some way connected to the fact that he's older and he's in a slightly deeper role now that he's the captain and he's keeping an eye on things. And they do have 2 big dirty red flags beside their 2 big midfielders, which is Kulusevski and Madison.
I think
Kulusevski's long-term, Madison's every other week short-term.
If they sort out their midfielders for next season and can keep Van de Ven fit, so you're probably looking at a centre-back, 2 midfielders, and an attacking player of some sort. If they can get those 3 or 4 in, I would be looking at Spurs players next year. I know that's a big take given the season they've had, but
I think Spurs could be that sleeper team for next year, though, to be fair.
Yeah, you've got Udogie, who's class when he's fit. I love him when he's fit. Pedro Porro is an assist machine. Van de Ven is amazing. Romero is Romero, but he's gone in the summer. Their midfield is the problem.
Yeah.
Just is.
And it's not even their attacking midfield, to be fair. I mean, Kulusevski and Madison are quality. And Jimmy, I know Madison was doing the business for you early on in the season. Yeah. It's that whole midfield. It's like they've got that soft underbelly. They really, really do. Son, for me, just to go back to that point, though, John, Son is not cooked for me at all. I think he is missing his best buddy up front.
I think he's missing a buddy up front.
Well, yeah, he is missing somebody up front. And Solanke, even though he was taken in the first round in the draft this year, I don't know.
Sorry, can we caveat that?
What I was thinking, but let's just park that. But he isn't a Kane replacement, and I think those two had a really, really good relationship.
But we also
brought the best out of those.
That early by a Spurs fan, so we're going to kind of mitigate that with the fact that he had his little Spurs boner on, and Son was already taken. So we're not.
So Spurs have 3 forwards, 3 listed forwards outside of Son, who's not really playing as a forward anymore.
Richarlison, Werner, and Solanke.
Incorrect, sir. Brennan Johnson and Solanke, and of the 3 of them,
Werner's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, those 3 forwards, as far as I can tell, add up to about 1 1/3 good striker in terms of draft picking. And the midfield is a problem, as well as the injury problem. If you look at who's actually in the centre of the pitch for most of the year, it's Bentancur or Pape Sarr. Not really world-beating quality. And then you add the defensive problems. And then you add that no matter how much you like Christian Romero, and no matter how much you like not Pedro Porro, but the other lad, Udogie, they're fucking card magnets.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Yeah.
And that's going to cost you points. Yeah. Van de Ven, brilliant player. I think the fastest man on a pitch this year. 37 kilometers
he's
an hour.
The fastest player in the Premier League by a distance.
The problem is that you see all this cool stuff that he does in real football terms, and it actually doesn't translate to fantasy because most of that speed is either a sudden breakout or a get back, neither of which you're actually scoring points for until he gets the ball and does something. And once he gets there, statistically speaking, it's not that interesting. He's a good player. He's just not a great asset for fantasy.
He also doesn't play enough because he
That's true.
Gets injured an awful lot.
Yeah, he does.
But I mean per game. He's inside 4 for the year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised about that though, because he's played very, very little.
You do have to take into account who he's playing beside there. To be fair, as well, with the quality, the quality, particularly when you're talking about defenders, the quality of the defense around you does have an impact on that. And the quality of the midfield, and when you're consistently just chasing back. Well, you're right. Fantasy side of things this season, he hasn't been great, but I wouldn't. To John's point, if they improve in the summer, if they win the Europa League final, I don't think they will. Unfortunately, if I'm putting money on it, I think it'll be United. But hey ho, we live in hope. But if they strengthen in the summer, if Solanke comes back, because he's not a Harry Kane, but he's a decent striker, he could get you 10 to 15 goals when he's fit.
At Bournemouth, he was very good. A bit better service, him staying fit. The one to watch for next season for me is Archie Gray. He and Lucas Bergvall, they're the two to watch for me. Archie Gray has played at centre-back all year despite being a right midfielder by trade. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's that good that at 18 they just went, fuck it, dump him into centre-half. And he's floated. I wouldn't say he's shot off or anything like that, but he's floated.
No, but he's held his own. He has held his own. For me, Kulusevski is the one who needs to kick on next season. And I think he could be one of the sleeper players that we don't consider for next season. He's injured. I don't think he'll make the Europa League final, but yeah.
That was how I got Madison and Matoma, was because he was injured, so he wasn't showing up the overall points for the year. And I think Kulusevski's going to fall into the same thing. You're right.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is that whatever about Brennan Johnson, I think with a stronger midfield, we see the best of Dominic Solanke again, because he always had some firepower behind him at Bournemouth that, again, he just hasn't had at Spurs this year. But I think he'll come good.
Second play balls is what I would call them. It's the midfield being able to stop the ball getting to the defense and get that kind of faster breakout. Like a team like Angers, they want that high press so that midfield who can get 5 yards further up the pitch, get the ball and recycle it to a forward faster. It's the same reason why Sadio Mane and Bobby Firmino were class at Liverpool. Yeah. They played a really high line. They played very aggressive pressing, and it's not the same, but it's in a similar vein before anybody comes at me for that. But if we I don't think Spurs are going to win it, but I think the fact even that they're there, if they can get a couple of decent little players coming in, they'll be fine next year. The real interesting story is over the other side. I fully expect United to win it because they've got 2 trophies in 2 years. They have pedigree for cups. They've got a couple of players there, like European Cup, fucking Casemiro. He's arguably the player of the tournament in the Europa League. Oh, Casemiro.
Yeah. And to be fair, Casemiro's been pretty decent over the last couple of weeks for United.
4 or 5 goals.
I haven't been watching.
He's got 4. I think he's got a few goals anyway in the Europa. Being a holding midfielder. Well, even if it's not goals, he has a few assists because I know he got 2 there in the last round and 2 in the round before that. So he's got 4 assists in the last 2.
The only wild card though, John, is that they're not playing a European club.
That's a problem.
Yeah, that's the great unknown here. I mean, they went out and they absolutely annihilated Athletic Club, who I would have put money on to win the whole thing, given the players, the quality of the players they have, particularly with Nico Williams in the team. That's who my money was on for the whole thing from about the second round of the knockout.
100%.
And for United to turn them over 3-0 and 4-1 was a ridiculous result, and fair play to them. But they're playing against a team where Amarin's style play suits playing against them.
So,
Amarin's
Jimmy, for your
continental
context.
coach.
So, Jimmy, for your context here, right? So you've got lads in the
Please.
squad that in Europe have essentially been not what they are in the Premier League. You've got Casemiro, is a fantastic example. We're talking 4 assists in the last 4 games is what he has under his belt, and a goal, I'm fairly certain. Mason Mount, 2 goals. You would have Hoyland has scored. Do you know what I mean?
Rasmus Hoyland.
Yeah. You've even got a couple of clean sheets sprinkled in here. Like in Europe, the lads have done very well. But the thing is, the Premier League season has gone so badly that we all knew. I think anybody who watched them knew in February that they had to go all in for the Europa League. And essentially, over the last 2 months, and very visibly over the last month, they have completely pied off the Premier League and gone, we're can't finish in Europe. Eggs, basket, meat. And they're a cup team. They're what Spurs hope to be. And I know United fans are going to murder me for that comment. But United right now are where Spurs hope to be.
Well, where United are right now is where Liverpool were under Rafa Benitez. And I'm going to get annihilated for that comment, but that's where they are.
I don't disagree with that. And
they're a cup team. And let's be honest about where they are at the moment. They are a cup team. They have a chance to build on that, but that's what they are.
Well, like you obviously saw the article I wrote up over on StatrDraft.com, the article that's up there on the Man United rebuild. Like, that picture changes very much if they have Champions League money, because I have it down that they have about 200 odd million to spend. They generally spend 1 to 150 a summer. This year they have less in the coffer, but they have a lot of players going out. So they have Anthony, whose value has just shot through the roof. They're going to get the best deal possible for him now because of how well he's played in Spain.
Well, he's looked like Ronaldo at Betis.
He's been possibly, like, if he was there for the whole season, he'd be in the La Liga Team of the Year. Like, that's how well he's played over there at the moment since he's gone over. It's bananas. Better numbers than
Anthony and Casemiro are good players.
Yep.
I know. Weird, isn't it?
Okay.
Who knew? I know.
Like, Casemiro for me is still, send him on his way, Joe. Go somewhere like the States or Saudi, get your paycheck, but go out with another trophy in your pocket and say, right, 3 years at United, 3 trophies in the bag, happy days, I'm a winner, and do that. That's fine. But in that article, I said they need a centre forward. I think they're still going to look for Delap. If they get Champions League money, they can probably open up that field a little more, because they're going to get rid of Rashford, they're going to get rid of Sancho, they're going to get rid of Anthony. Those 3 are gone. That's only. Then you have Eriksen that's going on a free. You have Lindelof going on a free. Johnny Evans retiring. Tom Heaton, who's on 40k a week, but for a third choice keeper who doesn't play, his wages are going to be freed up. There's an awful lot of the edges that are going to go, and Amarim's route. He can buy 6 players, not of differing values of money. And it's a case of the profile. They're going to be that kind of Dorgu style profile, lesser known, very athletic, more malleable. And he'll go, like, I read an interesting thing from a Sporting fan recently, and it was a case of he came in, they finished 4th in their first year, but they normally finish 2nd or 3rd. So then he went and got 6 new players in the summer, got rid of their 2 highest earning players in the dressing room, and the fans were like, oh, fuck, who is this psycho? Fire him. They wonder, like, he just fixed the dressing room problem, went, if you're a dick, you're not here. I think this summer is huge for United, but a winning Europa League and good business in the summer, I'm still not. But for your perspective, Jimmy, am I looking at United players for next season? Bruno is the only one that I'd be tagging on.
Diallo, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. But there is such a huge gulf after those 2. Like, it's been
Garnacho
a long time since I've seen any
surprising.
squad where the points were so concentrated on 2 players.
Yeah.
Usually when you see this, it's because Chris Wood has gone on a hot streak for Burnley. You know what I mean? It's that kind of level of gap. It's 15 or 14 a week for Bruno. Ahmed's 13 a week, and then the next up is Garnacho on 7. And from there it gets bad.
I was about to say I will be interested in seeing Garnacho next year. I think people forget how young he is. Like, he's 20. He's 20. He's going on 21. I saw a stat recently, and it was like his numbers versus Ronaldo's before their 21st birthday at United. Now, Garnacho's a few behind him, but it's not so far behind him.
Yeah, it's not a gulf.
it's like 5 goals, but in 4 more appearances. So Ronaldo has 5 or 6 more goals, but Garnacho has 4 or 5 more appearances. So there, you know what I mean? Ronaldo played less, has more goals, but it's not the point. It's a fella that you could see progressing again with another year and a couple of good senior professionals around the dressing room.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the same point we made about Spurs. If United win, and again, I fully expect them to do so, and they have a decent summer, there are players in there. Garnacho being one of them. Dalot could potentially kick on.
He's been useless this year.
He has been useless this year, but you'd consider him if he's available in round 8, round 9 of your draft. And,
I don't think
so.
I don't think so, because I'd be expecting Ahmad and Dorgu to be the starting wing backs next season unless they bring someone in. I think Dalot is going to be the backup over there. To be honest, Ahmad
I'm going to throw a name out there, boys, and forgive me for my ongoing centre back fetish, but I'm going to say Lisandro Martinez, healthy, is probably one of the safest fantasy assets they have.
Even with the volume of cards against
ACL in February. So what's the return time there, do you reckon?
He'll be there for next season, but his season is
not from the start, maybe.
No, he should be back for the start.
Okay. I think he was always a fairly decent asset, even when they were rubbish. Same as Dalot. I'm not sure about some of the others. Onana's colours have really been shown this year. He was so busy last year, but this year he's just garbage.
Like, put it like this: we know Gary is writing an article. Gary's currently working on an article of the crapnel of the league this season. The fellows who were massively underperformed.
Yeah, those players who you would have picked in rounds 1, 2, and 3, and you would have expected to. And shock horror, Onana will be in that list.
It would be between himself and Sanchez. Like, they're the only 2 options.
Yeah, and not to get into it because I don't want to ruin the surprise. But Onana's figures from last season to this season have fallen off pretty badly. When I looked into it, so it'll be Onana starting with Sanchez probably on the bench.
And just if you will indulge my weekly rant, I'm going to have my little rant before we let Jimmy talk about his data and his numbers and a metric that he has just invented that we're going to see on the Tilly box in a few years. This Europa League final is pissing me the fuck off. About a week ago, Arsene Wenger went out and doing one of his FIFA interviews. He was like, it's a joke that a team winning the Europa League should be able to qualify for the Champions League. Richard Keys followed that up yesterday with very similar comments, calling it a travesty and a disgrace. And I've seen a lot of commentary on it going, why is the Europa League finalists getting a place in the Champions League? Nobody cared last year when it was Frankfurt and they finished in the bottom half of their league. Nobody gave a bollocks the year before when Sevilla finished in the bottom half of their league and won it. Nobody cared the year before that when it was probably Sevilla again or whoever the hell it was that year. But the point stands that it's like, even the last time United were in the final, nobody cared. But it's a case that it's like, oh, because it's 2 Premier League teams and they're having rubbish seasons, let's change the parameters. Or from my perspective, is it a salty ex-Arsenal manager watching Arsenal win nothing? And it's like, me, our fans are going to be upset because somebody won something we didn't.
I think it's a little bit of that. I think there's a couple of things going on there. Number one, there's a little bit of salt. I think there's a little bit of salt from Wenger on that. There's probably a little bit of salt because of the 2 clubs that are involved. Traditionally, the 2 biggest rivals of Arsenal.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yep.
There's probably a little bit of salt as well, just overall, because it means 6 teams from the Premier League in the Champions League next season, which is unprecedented. And I won't lie, I have a bit of a problem with that.
Yeah, it's not the Champions League, not to
finish fifth, and we'll give you a load of money league. You're right. Interestingly, I've had this conversation with a few people, and I would love to see a Champions League where every champion of every league throughout Europe actually gets into it. So you have Shelburne away to Real Madrid in the group stages.
That's the way it used to be, though. That's the way it used to be way back when. That's like when Celtic were able to win.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the way it should be. It's absolutely the way it should be, but it won't happen.
UEFA got their Super League. That's all I'll say on the matter. It's very much they got the Super League. Look at the teams. Like the group stage this year, for both the Europa League and the Champions League, it was interesting matchups, but it felt a little unfair and flat to me because you just had like City going to Apoel while someone else is going to an actual difficult team. I know that can happen with groups and stuff like this, but it just felt a bit, wait, one leg, you're not letting the small teams get their home leg again. Like for Victoria Pleasant, getting their second game against Real in the Bernabeu, that's a once in a lifetime up. But this new format kind of takes away those opportunities because they want to get more matchups with the bigger teams.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
There does seem to be a broader conversation there, and it touches on the too many games injury Rodri thing at the start of the year, and it touches on the format of the Champions League. It's the money inflating the demands on the players. Yep. And the money is getting bigger, obviously, because numbers only go up. But the expectation of this high level performance from high level players on high level teams, and everybody else just kind of does something else over there, is a two-tier system, and it's getting increasingly entrenched. And Gary, I can't agree with you more about, league champions going to the Champions League. But then again, it's worth pointing out that Ireland is probably the only country in the world that literally has 32 counties, and we still can't have a straight draw for either the football or the hurling. Because things don't work out the way they should. And often it's because of the expectation of commercial demands, and often it's because of practicalities. And
do you want to hear anyone about Irish football? I know it's a weird tangent for a moment, but do you know the Irish Junior League is the largest amateur football competition in the world?
Really?
Yep, I didn't know that.
Yep, because the way the English system works is the non-league can step into the National League, and then the National League into the pyramid. So we obviously have a system where in Limerick alone we have Premier A, 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 3A, and those are the leagues at senior level, where participation is obviously lower than it's going to be at junior, at underage level, where you have 4 teams in Limerick who have 4 and 5 18 squads next year. It's great to see. There's huge improvements in the youth structure, coaching and stuff like that I can see. So hopefully that comes. But yeah, I think Gary's point on that kind of money, the fact that we had an Irish team there, even in Europe at all, even in the Conference League, that's going to have a shuffle effect, because that means there's a club with some dollars to go and invest in facilities, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's part of the reason why, and again, not to get into League of Ireland too much, but it's part of the reason why Shamrock Rovers have been so successful over the last 6, 7, 8 years, because they had their stint in, I think it was the Europa League.
It was, because it was
they were actually in the same group as Spurs, ironically enough, way back when. So, look, I think it doesn't make sense.
Their money from their jerseys being, because they always make a very, very sexy jersey. Is it the Guinness jersey this year? They had the Bob Marley one last year. They make their money off of.
Well, that's Bose. So I would, you don't want to open that kind of worms. But look,
sorry.
I think
what I mean.
But it's still a fair point. While you're in Europe, all of those different revenue streams increase. All boats rise when the tide comes in, and it's partly the reason why Rovers have been so successful. And going back to that piece, I think the saltiness from Wenger is because you have 6 teams coming from the Premier League into a European competition, which should just be for the champions, or at a push the top England 2 for your big leagues if you want to be.
England could have 10 teams in Europe in some capacity next year. Well, I think they will, because Spurs and United make that. So with the way the five obviously if City win the FA Cup, that pushes a position down. So that means the conference spot goes down to 9th, and then you'll have one of the other, obviously Spurs or United in the Europa. So you'll have half of the league next year in England playing European football in some capacity, which is
it's spectacularly convoluted, the permutations on it. I couldn't get my head around it. I had a look, and it was if Chelsea win or get a Champions League spot but then don't, and then if Brentford turn upside down and are suddenly wearing Bournemouth jerseys, then Liverpool go through to the conference. I was they just blew my mind, the permutations.
Jimmy, from your perspective as our data guy, you're looking at teams like a Brighton, the teams like a Bournemouth, the teams like that 6, 7, 8 position right now, that you're going to go, are you actually capable of playing Thursday night football? Is a Matoma, is a João Pedro next year worth anything? Or are they going to be oh my God, we're playing European football, let's put our party there, and then they're wrecked coming back on a Sunday, because that does happen to teams when they don't have the depth and squad size.
But that's the thing about Brighton, right? And you guys got your one reference each, right? Brighton are notoriously good at recruiting from smaller markets and getting high potential, high quality players for low prices, and as a result, they actually have a rather large squad and a rather large pool of players who are untested. And I think what you would see in that scenario is the Mitomas, the João Pedros, all of the big names are going to be out there putting it all into Europe, and that's fine. But you'd have a repeat of the end of last season where it goes off a cliff if they progress, because there would be over-reliance on untested players. And the only way to do that is rotation, because you need to see who's good, because none of them have game time. And if you've got rotation, you don't have cohesion. And Brighton without cohesion are the team that go up by 2 and lose 3.
But so, even then, from our perspective, of trying to draft squads next year, like those teams that are in that pocket where you're looking at, like this year, you're looking at a Semenyo at Bournemouth, you're looking at a Kluivert, you're looking at Mitoma, Van Hecke, you're looking at Iwobi, you're looking at these guys. If any of these lads are in Europe next year, it's a case of they're nearly doubling or increasing their workload by a third in terms of the season, and it makes it much harder for us drafting, because there's going to be a lot more squad rotation in the early stages of the season.
And I think you accidentally hit the proof of that point at the very top of the broadcast, because there's 2 teams that have a shitload of world-class players who aren't performing in the Premier League this year, and it's Spurs and United. And when I hear names like Casemiro and he's doing really, really well, and it's like, well, no, he's not in England. And I think actually a successful European run in something like the league, the Europa, could be absolutely fucking disastrous for where Brighton finish in the table.
Yep.
I mean, they're top half this year and crucially likely to finish ahead of Palace and Fulham.
Yep. I
see you, John.
And, it's okay. No, Fulham have thrown it away in the last month. Since the 1-0 loss to Bournemouth, it's really gone badly. It's really.
We'll get there. Don't worry.
Really
don't
sad.
Don't worry. I've done team analysis. It's going to hurt.
But yeah, long story short, United are going to win the Europa League. Arsenal fans are going to be salty about it. Ange is going to get sacked. That's my prediction. And United will be back next year with a very, very different squad. So now we're going to move over to Jimmy's favorite segment.
I'm making my prediction first. I'm going to say it happens the second time. I think Ange pulls it off and still loses his job. Genuinely. I know that sounds crazy, but that bottle has now been opened by West Ham, who are only across the road. I genuinely think he's completely cooked and they still win it.
You can't sack the manager at Spurs who wins you a trophy, any trophy. That means they get rid of the Spursy
it's
tag.
The year Kane left.
They lose the Spursy tag.
Well, that's true. They can't lose their identity for him.
It would be the most Spurs thing that they could do, to be fair.
Gary, go on, give us your prediction, then we'll move over to Jimmy's little nerd corner, where I'm going to have to get some sound effects for it, because that's going to become a segment. Jimmy's nerd corner.
Jimmy's little nerd corner. I think United win it. I think they win it quite comfortably. Ange gets sacked, but I don't think United are back next year. I think the car crash will continue.
Cool. Too much rebuilding to do.
Yeah, far too much rebuilding to do, and I still think they'll be a cup team for the next 4 or 5 years.
Fair. Jimmy, talk nerdy to me.
I want to geek out over numbers for a minute, because I always geek out over players, and we all have the players we love, and you're already sick of hearing the words Iwobi, Tarkowski. You know this, but what I wanted to do was have a look at teams this week and see how teams performed as an overall. But there's no way to do that, because different players use different numbers of, or different teams use different numbers of players throughout the course of a match, and opposition matters, and blah, blah, fuckity, blah. This time last week, I went all Jimmy Kramer on you, and I said, sell Forest by Brentford. Technically, I was right. Forest were in a low place on average and went down. Brentford are in a high place on average and went up, but neither of them is the story of the week. So what I came up with was NOA, which is the non-zero average. So you take the team, you add up all of their players' points over in Opta, you take out the ones who scored 0, because it's virtually impossible to score 0 in Opta if you play. So that's the squad removed. And what you're left over with is the theoretical, technical performance of the team as a whole. It's a bit hot, nasty, and unexpected, but it works as a broad stroke on who did better or worse than their results last week. Gary and I were discussing this just before we came on air, and his guess was that the big story that I had missed last week, for I did miss one, was Newcastle. It wasn't. Newcastle are up there. They have the third highest. They were the only ones over an N0 average of 10. Second was West Ham. Now, both of those teams won 2-0, one against Chelsea, one against United.
Can I make? Oh, sorry, I was about to say, is it Palace or Everton?
You were going to call it, yeah. It's Palace by a great distance. They're averaging 11 points per player last week against Spurs in a 2-0 win. So it's not a high-scoring game.
It also wasn't the real Spurs team, but anyway.
Well, yeah. Well, see, this is where actual football knowledge comes in, but I'm here for the numbers. So I can show you guys what that table looks like last week.
So are you telling me to pick players from teams that are playing Man United or Spurs?
Not exactly. What I'm saying is, if you have found yourself in a position where you're not sure what to do, the teams on the left, top to bottom, is how the players performed on average. If you don't know what to look at this part of the year, when everything's settled and teams are very, very level in their performance, they're just playing to play and win. There's no extra pressure. There's no selection issues apart from the rest. On the left is the total number of points, then the non-zero players, and the NOA, which is this lovely column here. As you can see, Bournemouth, Chelsea, Wolves, and Spurs and United are shit. And Chelsea, I'm rather surprised by, but then again, I'm kind of not. And here's the result. So, what I found interesting there was Villa are quite high up despite only winning 1-0. Southampton, look at them there, top half, 7.2 on average from a 0-0 draw, because those little saints went out and played their useless little balls off and held City to a draw, which might be the biggest result.
Sorry, Jimmy, I'm just going to pause you for a moment on your end.
Go for it.
I have to talk about one of the greatest bit of fucking football social media administrators from Southampton. Whoever that person is, give them a raise. Ruben Diaz after the game, ranting to the media in his interview. They didn't come out to play football. They didn't want to play us. So they put out 2 posts. The first one being like, oh yes, the relegated team that's conceded this many goals is going to come out and play you. Good one. And the second one was basically a highlight reel of all of City's terrible crosses and final third pass and going, we didn't come to play, was the quote.
That's where I was actually going next. I love that, but that's where I was going next. As you see the way City are scoring quite high there despite a shitty 0-0 draw against Southampton. The reason for that is passes. Mm-hmm. They are just tippy-tapping the ball around the place in their own half, but they can't do anything out front. And I find that so funny because I do not like them, those Man Cities. And then you go down through the table. Liverpool have kind of checked out. Arsenal, we're not going to talk about Arsenal. At Forest, like I said, it's not good. It's not good at all. And then over on the right, we've got their remaining games. Now, what I did here was, I'm not doing the difficulty ratings, right? I'm just saying, if last week is anything to go by, here's what to expect for the next 2 weeks. I know it doesn't work that way. I know Palace have a cup final. I know Spurs and United have a cup final. But let me play with my numbers, right? Sure. What I'm saying here is that Palace are now the asset to have, because Liverpool, despite being champions, are having their worst 6 weeks in a year and a half. They're dropping points where they shouldn't. Their eyes are off the ball. Statistically, they're mid-table bullshit, and I think they're going to be a softer game for Palace on the last day than anybody expects. But that's the real teams. I didn't stop there, because now I have a new toy. So I started having a look at averages in our league, because we've just moved in to an interesting phase, my friends. We're heading for the playoffs. Playoffs start this week. We're at the semi-final stages. Head-to-head. We'll come back to the eliminator next week. That's a whole other thing. But head-to-head, the semi-final is set. So what I did was I had a look at our average performance per player. And then I had a look at what we should have scored if we managed our teams properly. This will be fun.
I know where this is going already.
You do know where it's going. Now, there's good news for you, John, and there's bad news. The good news is, if you look over on the left, I'm having a shocker. This is a bad patch. The Aristocrats are having it a very bad time. Yeah. So the first column there is our average points per player. Dave on a massive 8.8. And remember, that's a squad of 18 players. So that's a huge performance there. Yourself and Dermot quite level on 7.5 plus, and I'm on a skinny 6. So if everybody managed their team properly, then you would, on this performance, you would show up and beat me next week, and Dave would beat Dermot, and that's that. Except, here's what we actually scored. I'm at a 92.75. I'm a bit behind your 105. I would have lost you this week, John. Mm-hmm. But if you had managed your team properly, your expected points would have been 110.64. and mine would have been 87, which means I outperformed the random numbers, got it? And you put the wrong players on the bench, my friend. You were only 95% efficient versus my 107. And over in the other half, it's the same story. Dermot is managing his team better than what he would have on auto pick with his squad. Whereas Dave, honestly, if you look at his expected points, if you look at his actual points, if you look at his average points, if Dave shows up and picks his team properly, he will beat Dermot in the semi this week, based on current form. He could win the whole fucking thing if he jumps in. So I hope he's not listening. But that being said, that was last week. This is this week. Things are different now. I now have Jacob Murphy. This makes me happy in my special place. Other teams are playing other teams. You can't reduce it all to just one number. But if you were to reduce it to one number, it's all about Palace right now.
Yep.
All about Palace. Because that kind of like 11 points per from a whole squad is a phenomenal score. And that's attacking play against, Spurs. Yeah, it was a 2-0 win, but it wasn't a 6-0 or a 7-0. There was nobody getting hat-tricks. There was nobody massively banging them in. It was widely distributed among their players. It was like 6 or 7 of them did well. Same thing for Brentford in my defence on last week. Shada, Flecken, Coyote, who I'd never heard of before, Nathan Collins, Brian Mbuemo, they're all above 10 points. So those are two teams where you're seeing a widespread performance by the whole team, even when there's nothing to play for. I still think Brentford are the more bankable, simply because I don't know what the cup final does to Palace. I think if they win, they'll be wrecked, and I think if they lose, they'll be wrecked anyway. They're going to throw all of their best players at high pace against City, because it is the only way that they pull this off. And, I'm in two minds on this, because I'm also aware that them winning would not be great for Brighton because they'd be winning, but also City winning might make some space in the table for European slots, I believe, because City as cup winners would pass. And I'm not going to go into the maths on that, but I know that Brighton should want City to win. But in my cold, cold heart, I can't cheer for Man City.
No, I think every neutral, every football fan, if you're not a Man City fan, you want a Palace win here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's the best thing for football. And at the end of the day, isn't that the only thing that matters? Is that football?
No, Brighton are the only thing that matters.
Fuck off, Jimmy.
I have to jump in though, and I have to disagree with you on the Palace piece.
Okay.
To be honest, and I think you've touched on it. You've touched on it briefly there. Palace probably won't be qualifying for Europe through the league, so they are going to put all of their eggs in the FA Cup basket, which means in the league they're pretty much checked out. They're safe. No reason for them to risk anything. They're going to Liverpool on the last day of the season. Liverpool are champions. Home game at the end. I'm putting money on Liverpool knocking out a 4 or 5-0 win there, to be perfectly honest with you. And Jimmy, if you're in the final and Salah is in your team, I think that's potentially what gets you over the line this year. But I don't think you're getting past the semi-final. But that's a separate thing. My money, if I was looking at anybody this week, it's Newcastle. It's Newcastle.
The only thing about Newcastle, Gary, is who they're playing.
But they have something. But Arsenal are checked out. Arsenal don't have anything to play for. Half their players are going to be on the beach already. They're out of all of the cup competitions. Mathematically, they could still finish 6th, but that's not going to happen. Let's be real about it. Newcastle have something to play for because they need to secure Champions League football. If you see in Arsenal in the first half against Liverpool, they were pedestrian at best. So I wouldn't be worrying about playing Arsenal at this stage of the season. To be honest, Newcastle is where you need to be looking at value, and for you to pick up Jacob Murphy was stroke of genius. But I'd also be looking at Tonali, and I'd be looking at I think Mahrez is already on Dave's team.
Yeah,
but Tonali high scorer on the stats. Good to grab if he's going.
Not a high score on the stats season to date, but you've got to take those other factors into account, that they have something to play for. They're playing an Arsenal team, as I said, who don't have anything to play for. He was very, very good at the weekend in the 2-0 win against, I can't remember who it was against off the top of my head. It was against Chelsea. So that's where I would be putting a bit of focus to see if there's any value to be had there. Would be Newcastle. Not so much Palace. Palace will concentrate on the cup and will suffer in the league for it.
Bear in mind, it's Wolves they have next week. I think Palace, even without having to break their hearts, will do bad things to Wolves. Wolves are on horrendous form at the moment. There's nobody firing. Cunha's not even firing right now.
But again, it's
I
dead
feel so
rubber.
justified. I feel so justified about that one. Fuck Wolves. Fuck them. Go to the championship next year. Sell Aït-Nouri. Sell Cunha. Off you pop. I'd rather Leeds stay up. They've skirted. To be honest with you, look, they're one of these. This is my second rant of the night, but for me, they're one of those teams that they've been selling their best players for the last 5 or 6 years. They've not really replaced them very well. Like, remember that forward that they bought a couple of years ago for 40 million? He's still on the books and getting loaned out every year. Like, they're selling. They're getting, like, Gary O'Neill kept them up by the skin of their teeth, treated him horribly. Like, they're just one of those teams that they've been skirting with for so long. And if they sell, and this happens to teams for years, so this isn't a personal dig at fucking Wolves or anything like that, but many teams have done this down the years, that they've sold their best players 4 or 5 years on the trot. Southampton being a perfect example of that, when they sold Mane, Van Dijk, fucking
Tadic, Klein,
Ramsdale.
Well, Ramsdale's legally obliged to join whichever team is being relegated.
4 or 5 years that was going places, and then they're surprised when they inevitably get relegated. And I think Wolves have been skirting with that for a while. And when you have players like Cunha and Aït-Nouri who know that they're out in the summer, do you really think they're putting the bodies on the line the last 2 or 3 weeks and risking a potential injury that could stop a transfer? Not happening.
No. But then on the flip side, Palace are not going to do the same with a cup final the following week.
No, they're not. But Wolves will.
So that'll be a dead rubber. You know, probably a 0-0, nothing actually happening during that game.
Like Aït-Nouri and Cunha aren't putting themselves in the shop window. No. Their deals are already done. They're now
they don't need to
for the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, they absolutely don't need to. And anyone below them, to be fair, is happy to be playing at a Premier League level at Wolves. Although I would agree with you, after next season, I think they go down. I think Leeds stay up. Because I think Leeds actually might have their house in order this time around. But yeah. And actually, I'd be happy to see them stay up, because I do like seeing Leeds in the Premier League, even though I don't like them as a club. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
There's these traditional teams.
Yeah. They're like Villa. They deserve to be there. They're a Premier League team.
They do.
I'd rather see them with their house in order, fighting and competing, than seeing, not to be rude about them, but like an Ipswich, or not even Ipswich, a Leicester or Southampton who didn't even give it a try this year. Ipswich at least came up and gave it a whack. Whatever, they weren't ready for it. It's fine. But the other two teams came up and didn't even try. So I'd rather Leeds with a year in the league, and actually they're the team that will give it a go. Wolves will continue doing the cycle that they're doing at the moment, going, who's done well enough to sell? Whereas Leeds, if they stay, they will look to push on and go back to where they belong. And I'm doing that bunny rabbits for Dermot's benefit, because
I'm not going to open a massive can of worms at 48 minutes in, but didn't even try is grossly offensive to our Lord and Master Jamie Vardy.
They didn't try.
I think they tried. I think they just weren't good enough, mate.
No, they didn't try.
I don't see any material difference between Southampton and Leicester.
They came into the league and sold their best player to Chelsea, who has played 4 fucking Europa League games, Europa Conference games from all season in Dewsbury Hall.
Oh, him, yeah.
Their best player last year, they sold him off, who hasn't played this year, who'd have been much better suited staying there. And actually, I don't know. I think I'll go with it. But anyway.
Yeah, and to be fair, Southampton did the same thing with Lavia as well.
Yep.
They did the very, very same thing. And while you could probably argue about Leicester, because in certain games they've tried, but you could argue it either way. Southampton certainly didn't. And look, we've spoken about that before. They've been a bit of a dumpster fire this season. But yeah, going back to the previous piece, Jimmy, around teams to look at. I think Palace are up final bound and focusing very much on that, so I would not necessarily be looking at it. There won't be a repeat of Mateta last year.
No,
I wouldn't fucking want to be.
I don't think there's any. Like, the last game of the season this year is, it's ceremonial, it's procession stuff. You're going to have every team is going to be doing bits and pieces before the game, at halftime and stuff like that. It's going to be more of a, American-style showpiece because there will be no games come the last game of the season with anything riding on it, bar potentially, maybe, Chelsea Forest. Apart from that, every other game is meaningless on the last day of the season this year.
And that's actually why I'm just looking up the fixtures for the last, and maybe this is not one for tonight, but there's definite value to be had when you're comparing teams or playing teams with nothing to play for. I.e., and I know I keep going back to it, and it's a very, very painful topic for you, Jimmy, but Palace Villa last year, Villa had nothing to play for because they'd already gotten to where they needed to get to, and Palace just went out and absolutely annihilated them because some of those players were playing for jobs. And there's, I think that's where, going back to that playoff piece, that's where it's going to be won or lost in the playoffs this year with the four.
I'm sticking with Brighton and Brentford as two teams chasing 8th place in a year where 8th place might matter, depending on how the cup goes.
Absolutely. Well, they're perfect examples of teams still have something to play for, so they will absolutely put bodies on the line. So that makes perfect sense. Everton would be a sleeper team because they're finishing at their home ground and they'll want to give their fans a good send off. Yeah, exactly. And Liverpool will be the
Leicester
same.
are going to play their 15-year-old. He's going to, the Leicester 15-year-old Monza or whatever his name is. He's going to play. You're going to have these ceremonial fucking Trent. There's no point picking him. He ain't going to play. After the booing last week, after the booing last week, his season is done.
Dropped him in the limb this week. Never looked back.
Yep.
Or last week.
There's a few of these things where you're just going to look at it and go, okay, we know what's happening here, and here. United on the last day of the season with nothing to play for, Tom Heaton and Johnny Evans are probably going to start. Do you know that kind of way? It's going to be those kind of...
And the legend that is Harry Maguire.
Don't even get me started.
Back Phil Jones.
Playing up front.
Playing up front.
Yeah. Playing up front. But old school.
Yeah. But going back to week 37, Newcastle, Villa would be another team to look at. They've got Tottenham at home. Tottenham will be, they'll be very much focused on the Europa League final, so we'll be looking for a bit of value there from Villa if there's anyone
Villa
available.
Have a very nice fixture stack, actually, because I think they have United the week after.
They do. They've United away the week.
So they Spurs the week before. They've United the week after. 6 point fucking banker there. Yeah, pick up stack on your Villa.
Absolutely. Everton are another team. Their last game of the season or their second last game of the season at home is a home fixture against Southampton. It's the last game at Goodison Park. Pick up Beto. I'm telling you now, do it.
Yeah.
Even if you sit him on the bench, that's the way to go. West Ham potentially would be a one to look at because Forest are in free fall, but that one's a hard one to call. And after that, it is Brentford, Bournemouth. As your other ones, Bournemouth have City away, but again, City are concentrating on the cup.
Bournemouth are a do not touch. I'm telling you, Gary, Bournemouth are toxic. Don't touch them. Don't go near them. There is nobody to jump on with Kluivert not there and Semenyo not happening. Kirkez's head is elsewhere. There's no asset there. Kepa.
That Bournemouth team is going to get dismantled this year, by the way. Kepa. He's on loan. He's gone. Huysen, gone. Kirkez, gone. Semenyo, gone. Kluivert will be there next year, but that's their stack.
Yeah, well, that's the team, if they get into Europe, who will feel the pain the most next season in the league.
Or they're going to get minced.
They're not getting Europe. It's Brentford or Brighton. I'm telling you, the Bournemouth thing is over. And it's gas. Like who wrote, I think it was one of my articles. We were talking about teams towards the end of the season to keep an eye on, strangely, but that was a while ago. And no sooner did I say Bournemouth, or who would be in for Europe when there were still 11 teams in the mix. And I said Bournemouth will be fighting for top half. And I think that fight's only going to get harder for them. But that's enough of that for now, isn't it? As we melt into overheated Irish potato puddles. It's warm, lads. It's warm.
So I think we're in a good spot to cover it at that. Wolves get relegated, Bournemouth to slide down the table, United to win the Europa League, hopefully Palace to win the FA Cup. I don't have anything else other than anybody who's listening, anybody who's watching, head over to the site, StatrDraft.com, StatrDraft.com. Hit up the waiting list. The app is so fucking close now. The app is so close now that I can almost smell the fake digital grass. So do the thing. But for now, we're going to box it off. We're wrapping. We're done for today. And we're going to come back next week with some more football shenanigans. And
Night,
hopefully a
homies.
semi-final win for me over Jimmy. And